Hello and welcome to Management Centered. My name is Yvette Gyles. I'm a director at the Management Center Learning, and this is our second ever episode. For those of you that don't know us, the Management Center is a training, learning and development agency supporting managers across the not-for-profit sectors. And ultimately, we really believe that learning can help people to achieve even more greater good in the work that they do. Last time out, we shared our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. So do check out that episode and let us know what you think. You can email Yvette at managementcentre.co.uk. In these podcasts, Management Centered, we are aiming to achieve two things. One, explore what does it mean to be a manager, particularly in a charity or not-for-profit space. And secondly, to give you practical advice. So you might be someone who manages other people. Perhaps you want to find ways to manage yourself. Maybe you're an aspiring manager looking to move into your first management role, or maybe you're an experienced manager wanting to step into leadership. We're here to help you navigate those journeys and to help you along the way. This episode is all about why we love learning, and slightly to decide why we think you should love learning too. Because we know it's really easy to say that learning is important. It's much harder to make it happen. So in this episode, we've brought some new voices in for you, and we'll hear from them now. First up, Roy Johnson, Learning and Development Lead at Outward Housing, a London-based supported living charity. And Roy has sent us in some thoughts in advance. Let's hear from Roy.
Hi, I'm Roy Johnson. I'm the Learning and Development Lead at Outward Housing. Outward is a housing association where we specialise in people with learning disabilities and autism and delivering other services out in communities. Why did I get into L&D? I've been in L&D for many years now, and it was really around helping people. I started with helping students and graduates when they first came into the organisation, developing them and giving them skills that would help them with their careers. And then I've moved through to sort of more senior people. And then at Outward, I deal with everyone across the whole organisation in terms of their learning and development and their training.
Thank you, Roy. And we've also heard from Jennie Blake, a learning expert with buckets of charity management experience, who also sent in some thoughts in advance. Let's hear from Jennie.
Hello, I am Jennie Blake, and I am a wellbeing trainer and consultant and a stress management and burnout coach. My background has been working in the not-for-profit sector for about 28 years, predominantly working in services in the homelessness sector and with young people. For the last 15 years or so, I have been in management roles, and the previous 2 or 3 roles I had were in senior management positions. I left the sector, I left employment about 4 years ago to set up my business as a trainer. I guess the first question is then why? Why did I get into training? Why did I get into learning and development? And the real reason is because I wanted to make an impact. You can see from my choice of career, for the decades that I've been doing it, is that I want to make a difference in people's lives. I want to contribute to society, to communities that I'm part of. And I think for me, it got to a point where I felt that I could have more impact if I was working specifically in L&D than working for one organisation, perhaps with a limited staffing group and limited service user group. I think now working as a learning and development consultant or a trainer, I get to work with so many different organisations and therefore have contact with so many members of staff, hundreds, if not thousands of members of staff who then go on to work with their service users. So the ripple effect of that is so much wider. I feel like there's real value or I can offer real value and it can have that real kind of ripple effect, which is really, really wide. And that's hugely motivating for me.
Thank you, Jennie. I'm joined today to discuss why learning matters by two more experts in the field. First up, my colleague Laura. Laura, could you tell us all about you?
Hello, my name is Laura Slater, and I am a co-director with Yvette at the Management Centre, as well as a principal consultant. I've been with the Management Centre for the last 10 years, but previously I was a manager in various conservation and environmental charities in the not-for-profit sector. How do we maximise our learning from workshops into our real life roles and having the impact that we want to have with the people that we serve and the places that we work within?
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. And I'm also thrilled to say we are joined today by Cam from Fundraising Everywhere. Could you tell us about you?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name's Cam St-Omer Donaldson. I use the pronoun she, her. So as you mentioned, I'm currently head of membership and engagement at Fundraising Everywhere, but I am also a fundraiser, a trainer. I often use the phrase a bringer, a togetherer of people, and a compliance enthusiast and storyteller. And I guess my introduction to storytelling was my first ever job about 14 years ago now. As a telephone fundraiser, I kind of fell into the role as most people, if you've had anything similar, will have done. But I actually never left. And I loved the fact that I got to tell stories, that I had the ability to be able to inspire members of the public to join for a good cause, to support the causes that they care about, really. So since then, I've had many roles within the fundraising and charity sector, often within our enabling teams, anything within learning and development, inspiring other fundraisers to be awesome at what they do. And indeed, where I've landed with the online digital learning and development platform, which is Fundraising Everywhere, where we bring learning, development, connection, community to fundraisers everywhere, as it says on the tin. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Well, isn't it clear that we all absolutely adore learning and we're very passionate about it? I know for a fact that Roy and Jenny agree. So let's take some time now to listen to them about why learning matters so much in our sector.
Why do I think learning and development is important in 2025? I think a lot of it is around confidence, helping people to have the ability to tackle new issues and new challenges that they perhaps haven't seen before. It's around giving managers and staff the ability to coach and develop others to help them grow within the organisation. So it's really key to what we're doing.
Thanks, Roy. Let's hear from Jenny.
So I do think that learning and development is really important now more than ever. I think particularly in the not-for-profit sector, because for lots of organisations, particularly in kind of health and social care, we're experiencing what I would call a staffing crisis. Turnover is ridiculously high. Staff retention, there are massive issues around staff retention. You know, staff teams are overstretched, underpaid. You know, we are facing huge challenges with funding and statutory support. You know, it's a really, really challenging time to be working in the sector. And because staff turnover is so high, it means there's a constant stream of new people coming into the sector, which means that there's a continuous need or a constant need for continuous high quality training. But not only that, in terms of the kind of the skills and the knowledge that is needed, staff need workplaces where they feel valued, developed and supported. So there's kind of two aspects of this. We need to ensure that we're giving the training to staff so that they are able to do their jobs well, so that they're able to create long-lasting outcomes with their service users, with the people that they're working with. But at the same time, we want to create workplaces that staff want to stay in, right? We want to create those workplaces where people are being developed, they feel supported. And I think that L&D really can do that.
Great to hear there from Roy and Jenny. Some key points about why the sector in particular needs learning, ultimately to deliver the mission through our people. And to do so as we continue to face change and challenge in our operating environments. Really interesting stuff. So Cam, I'd like to come to you now to think about the work that's happening at Fundraising Everywhere. And you've done some interesting research about learning in the charity space, the not-for-profit sector, which shows that despite the benefits we've just heard about, there's also some barriers. Could you tell us a bit more about what you found in your research?
Absolutely. So yeah, we ran some research last year to find out more about the connection and what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily connection, but yeah, the direct correlation between learning and development, and that actually bringing better well-being, better retention, and of course, within the fundraising space, within the charity sector, also kind of meeting those results and fundraising targets. So as someone who's a learning and development enthusiast, of course, I'd say those things are all true, but we wanted some kind of hard evidence to be able to demonstrate that and to help fundraisers demonstrate the benefit to their managers, internal teams, senior leadership teams, etc. So what we found, and some of the kind of key things that really stood out for us, was that charities that prioritize learning and development are more likely to meet their fundraising targets. Almost everyone, so that was 91%, who said that they were in growing organizations had actually attended training. Therefore, organizations that had that kind of learning and development commitment, whether that was internal resources or benefiting from external providers, consistently were outperforming those who kind of didn't have it, those without that kind of learning and development opportunity. And that was across all kind of key performance metrics, which for us really proved that learning and development isn't a nice to have or an addition, as sometimes it's phrased, but actually really fundamental to organizational and individual success. So those without this access, they also then started to state, if I don't have that access to learning and development, they mentioned wanting to leave the sector. And in a sector where retention is already struggling, as always, we know that. This again just kind of highlighted to us why that learning and development kind of focus is so key. We also found that of the participant whose sort of L&D needs were not being met, 54% of them were looking to move from their current employers in the next 12 months. So again, they were looking to leave because that wasn't part of the role and the offer that they had at their organization. And that was in comparison to only 5% of individuals looking to leave where their needs were being met. So again, in a sector kind of struggling already to retain that talent, it's worrying and really shows that kind of correlation between L&D opportunities and job satisfaction and employee retention. Now, we also found that though most fundraisers, 87%, had participated in at least one learning and development kind of event in the last year, which is great. Like, it's brilliant that people are going to those. Many organizations were kind of giving and offering between sort of 2 and 3 initiatives, which was kind of really positive for us. But what we also kind of discovered when we looked through some of the qualitative data was actually sometimes those initiatives weren't necessarily the right ones. So it's great that you're offering them, but no one's going to take them up or be able to put them into practice if they're not the ones that actually people need. So people who were kind of not having that access, even though their organizations might have been providing it, they used words such as feeling disappointed and feeling really frustrated, which absolutely made us really sad. And then the last thing that I really wanted to highlight, and I guess this was one of the biggest challenges that really touched our hearts at Fundraising Everywhere, predominantly because it's one of the reasons we were founded back in 2019, is that smaller charities across the board were struggling. Smaller charities were more likely to say that they hadn't set any goals, whether those were financial or to do with kind of development. And although half of all those kind of individuals had reported having no development plan, only 12% of those who had a plan were saying that it was even reviewed regularly. So there was a real kind of correlation and focus for us that kind of lack of formal development planning was having a massive impact, particularly on smaller charities, where we know it's already a kind of stressful environment, challenging environment as well. So that ability to be able to reach those kind of ambitious fundraising goals, also protect and look after your staff and retain them and keep them happy, was even more kind of stark within smaller organizations as well. So yeah, we had lots of questions that we think as a sector we should be asking ourselves, but not just asking, also striving to find those solutions to make sure that L&D is more equitable and accessible for everyone.
Yeah, that's so I completely hear that tension between people understand the value, but making it happen is such a barrier. And Laura, you wanted to come in on that. I can see you've got something to add. Go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, lots of really interesting information there. And something that you said earlier on about that is learning and development is fundamental, but it's also about what is fundamental in that learning and development. And so I was sharing with some of my colleagues previously in terms of a role that I've been in before on a practical level, having a chainsaw qualification, absolutely fundamental in terms of the work that I was doing. But what I would say as well is that I wish I'd had management development as well, and that was seen as just as fundamental as being able to handle a chainsaw well, because the impact that it would have had in terms of the people that I managed, how I was able to support them and develop them, would have been huge. I just didn't have that opportunity at the time to take that training, which is such a shame.
And just for clarity for our audience, Laura does not use a chainsaw in her current role as a training provider. In her previous work as a forest ranger, yeah, and I think that brings up a really interesting point that, you know, the training has to be practical and relevant that people engage in and learning they can use. But sometimes we might not always see the relevance straight away. And we know this in the programs that we offer, that when participants do engage in management development or personal development, those sort of softer skills, they really love the experience, but it's harder to make a case to it when you've got, you know, safeguarding or chainsaws that actually deliver a real world outcome. If that training isn't there, it's harder to make that return on investment clearer. And that's something we need to get better at, is saying, if this, then this happens. And I think that's something that actually Roy and Jennie talk about a bit when they talk about why it matters, that if you can support people with the skills they need to engage with other people, whether as a manager or a fundraiser, you will deliver your mission. So it's making that case. And that's sort of where we're at, and really fascinating to think about the data you've got there, Cam. I also want to do a little bit of a mystic moment and think, what do we think is coming up? And how can we use this to sort of make the future of learning a bit better? So let's cut back to Jennie and Roy, who have some thoughts. Let's hear what they have to say.
What do I think the future holds for learning and development? I think the future of learning and development I think it's going to be shaped by three big shifts. The first is a stronger focus on well-being and resilience. I have seen this already. I think the pandemic has changed things enormously for learning and development. I think we have moved beyond talking about, you know, having a work-life balance to actually attempting to create workplaces that are genuinely trying to support mental and emotional health. I think the conversations have evolved. I think we've got a whole new workforce who are much more emotionally illiterate than ever before. And I think that people are much more likely to assert their needs around their well-being now than ever before. So I genuinely think that there's a stronger focus on that. The second thing I think that the future holds is the need to have more accessible and flexible learning opportunities. This is fascinating for me because I set up my training business during the pandemic. So I literally set up my training business online, and I've networked extensively over the last 4 years with trainers who were working prior to the pandemic. And I hear a lot from those professionals that they really struggled transitioning their businesses to offering learning online. And actually, I also have conversations with lots of managers and HR departments who also kind of are perhaps sometimes stuck in that way of thinking that the only training that's of any benefit or that has any value is in person. And I just really want to challenge that. I really want to challenge that. I think that there are a number of different ways that we can mix and match our training now that can be really effective. I do probably 50-50 now. I do 50% of my training in person, 50% of my delivery online. And some of the benefits of delivering online are things like working with a national organisation and being able to have managers from all over the country attend a session and meet each other and share practice and hear about each other's challenges in a way that just wouldn't be possible financially if we were doing that in person. So I think there's going to be more of this flexibility around how learning is facilitated. And I think we'll see a little bit more flexibility around things like having bite-sized training, or coaching and peer-led learning. So I think there's more developments to happen as we go forward into 2025. And then finally, I think the final thing that's going to really kind of change, or the shift that we're going to see in focus, is going to be towards learning and development that supports retention. I started off by saying, it's one of the biggest challenges that we see in our sector, staff retention. And I think that this plays through here. So as this issue continues, as organisations struggle to manage the turnover of staff, I think organisations are going to have to invest in more development, not just to upskill new incoming staff, but also to keep staff engaged and committed to their roles. So it's part of that longer term investment and development in staff.
What do I think is the future of learning and development? I'm probably going to answer that in two different ways. Initially, for Outward, we're looking at things like shorter and sharper bits of learning to teach people one topic really quickly, rather than spending hours on e-learning. And then the second thing for us is around developing learning curiosity. So I'm working closely with our HR team to make sure that people we onboard have this curiosity, this growth mindset. They don't need to come necessarily with the right skills and experience, but what they do need to come with is the right attitude to be able to learn, to grow and develop in the organisation. Then in terms of L&D overall, I suppose it's how technology and artificial intelligence are impacting what we're doing. Many charities are still catching up with digital, behind what perhaps private sector companies have done in years previously. So it's around us not being left behind, but also being able to make use of automation and AI. There's lots of things happening around using it for evaluation. There's lots of things in terms of it changing job roles and what people are doing. So really thinking about how learning and development can help with every aspect of an organisation going forwards.
Similar trends there then from Roy and Jenny, talking about more blended, more accessible approaches to learning, the impact that technology might have, and addressing resilience and wellbeing in the sector. And I would agree, this sounds like there's a need for learning and it's not going anywhere. So Cam, what are your thoughts? Where do you think the future takes us when it comes to learning?
I think it's really interesting to hear from others as well. And I feel like I want to say something sci-fi related every time we talk about like the future. I want to be like, everyone's going to have VR headsets and I don't know, learning's going to be streamed into your eyes or something. But I think obviously I don't believe that that's the future of learning. And I think it's more about that kind of, yes, you mentioned sort of blended, but also having a variety of learning opportunities that look really different and appeal to people's learning needs. So there's something around kind of that we saw in our research, really looking at micro learning. The biggest barrier was time, right? The biggest barrier is always time. Our to-do lists are never ending. So things like micro learning sessions that are between sort of 20 and 40 minutes, whether that be webinar like we do at Fundraising Everywhere, where everything's sort of on demand, or being able to have that option of something that's hybrid. So maybe there's an on-demand session and then you're able to do that in person later on. I think also the biggest thing that we saw and the biggest trend I think we'll continue to see is those different formats. Traditionally in the sector, we've always gone to the space of a conference that predominantly is held in London and predominantly is held in person. And there are great spaces for that. And I've really benefited in my career from being at those London in-person conferences and continue to do so. But there are so many different ways that people learn. So it could be something that I've really valued, having a mentor mentor. And that's an opportunity to learn from others. It could be being a part of a community like Fundraising Everywhere, where you are learning from other organizations and what they're doing, and they're retelling case studies. A really big one that I'm a massive fan of as well. It could be learning from failures. So actually having discussions and conversations with people about things that don't work, because that actually is going to inspire you to do and try something different. I think, again, that kind of way of having those different formats and different types of learning that don't just appeal to one learning style, not only ensures that there's more engagement in learning, but actually that people are learning in a way that's best for them, which means they're going to be so much more effective implementing that learning, whether that's at your organization or wherever they go on to beyond. And they're going to feel so much better and have that kind of confidence to be successful. My last thing, and I wonder if it's like a bit of a, I'm influencing the future, or I'm trying to, or if it genuinely is something I think is going to happen, but I'm trying either way, is I use a phrase, learning to learn, and the importance of that, right? And I think there's definitely been much more of an interest with people saying, okay, great. Now there are some of these different ways that we can learn and we can take in information. Thanks for sharing this variety. But how do I put in place things like, I don't know, a personal development plan? How do I start to kind of do it in a more structured, formalized way so that I'm actually educating myself on the best ways for me to be able to learn and make sure it actually happens? So I think there's going to be a big piece, or there is already, certainly at Fundraising Everywhere, we've been developing lots of learning resources that actually just help and guide people into how they want to structure their learning, whether that be webinars, conferences, training, mentors, coaches, or talking and having a cup of tea with someone in the sector that they really admire and they want to hear what they've been up to. So yeah, it's not sci-fi, I don't think, but I do think it is around those different formats and prioritizing that learning about how to learn best.
Absolutely agree. And I had quite the visual there of everyone with their Oculus headsets and their little avatars. But you don't need that. We don't need more technology. What we need is more conversation in lots of different ways. I think that's really important. Laura, coming to you. So what we've just heard, learning's not going anywhere. There's lots of ways we can make it happen. People need help to make it happen. And there's something there for managers as well, because this isn't just about managers learning, it's about the manager role in helping others to learn. So what advice can you give our people there? What can they think about?
I think just touching on lots of the things that have come up in what people have said already. First of all, managers need to let their people know that learning is a priority and to make time and space for it, and that they will give them the time and space for it as well, that they're not expected to handle emails while on a workshop or having a coaching or mentoring call. Just giving that time and space is so important. I also think just building on around that conversation piece is having conversations with the people that you manage on a continual basis around what are your aims around a particular learning need that you have or a particular learning opportunity that you've got coming up. What do you think you're going to get out of this? And then while it's happening, what are you getting from this? Tell us a bit about what you're learning. Share that with the rest of the team as well, so that everyone can hear that and can bring in their thoughts and have impact around the learning that you're having. And then I think afterwards, it's how do they embed, particularly if they've been on a live workshop or training workshop, how do you embed that in the day-to-day? What support do you need? How will we know that this is working? And what else do you recognize you need as a result of being on this? Because as Cam was saying, you're learning to learn. Once you learn more, you realize there's even more out there. So what's the next step? How can we build on this even further? So having those conversations as a continual basis and that cycle of there's always going to be things coming up. There's always going to be things you're learning at the moment. There's always things that you can build on previous learning as well. So just some really practical things that managers can do to support learning and to, I think as Jennie says, that culture of learning and to support that to happen.
Absolutely. Cam, you wanted to say something there. Come back to us. What do you want to add?
I totally agree with everything Laura was saying. I was like sitting here, like nodding my head and doing all my active listening. But I just wanted to kind of echo what Laura was saying, but also add like something that we've heard at Fundraising Everywhere from lots of our organizational members, is about how do you embed the learning into what happens on the day to day. So some of those members are doing things like their managers have said, actually, at the start of any campaign that you're going to be working on, or the start of any new project that you're going to be doing. And for the ones that have been members of Fundraising Everywhere, they're like, go and watch a session on that particular subject so that you can feel inspired. Doesn't matter what that session kind of gives you in terms of that, whether it's something that you're going to go and use in that particular project, but get that inspiration, get that knowledge, hear what other people have been doing before you actually start that project, or before you actually launch, like even start the planning for that campaign. So it's really embedding it into kind of your project planning, which makes it a little bit easier, I think, to like to actually fit in and to do if you see it as part of your process in the first place. And then that second point that Laura made about kind of one-to-one conversations that aren't solely about work objectives or workload in that sense, but also about your personal objectives too for development, and not always thinking that that personal objective must mean progression. It doesn't always. Sometimes it means squiggly lines, and it doesn't always meaning on a kind of upward trajectory. Sometimes it's about motivation. Sometimes it's about inspiration, you know, and there's this assumption that if you kind of embed and invest in people's learning and development, that they'll leave, which could be true. And they may leave and go and join the sector and make it continue to make it an awesome place to be. But they could also stay. And that's cool too, because they'll stay with those skills or those kind of inspiration or motivation that they've got. And then they'll be able to bring that back to your organization and make it even better. So I think either way, it's a win-win, right? So not just seeing it as a means that it's only about progression, or it means that somebody's going to leave your organization. They could do, that's awesome, but they could also stay, and that would be a massive bonus to them as an individual and you too.
And I'm going to add even more to that. I absolutely agree. I think there's something there as well about impact. So when we're talking about what people are learning and what they're achieving, remembering to tie it back to that mission and the impact that this has. Jennie gives some lovely examples there about working in homelessness, that ultimately it's about the service user having trust in the organization. And that comes all the way back to the training that the individual person has had. And also the impact that they have is the motivating piece, right? That's why they want to stay in the job. But as Cam says, if they leave and go on to be amazing, we've added impact to the sector, and they're going to advocate for your charity. They're going to say that it's a great place to work, that achieves brilliant things. And who then wouldn't want to fund an organization doing that? So there's impact all around. And I think that's something really important that managers need to do. Yes, time and space and conversation, but always bring it back to that strategic impact we're trying to make. Roy and Jennie have more to say. Let's cut to them for some more top tips for managers.
In terms of what managers can do to support learning, I think it's making time for it. Don't deprioritise it when workloads are high. Don't take people off of courses and stop them from learning when people are busy. It's really around recognising that learning and development is really useful, and in the long term will help the managers and also the staff. And I suppose it's encouraging it. We sometimes have people that aren't so keen on learning and development and training, but it's what can managers do to help encourage that, to help explain how useful it's to be, to get staff really engaged in the process of learning and development?
You know, the number one thing that managers can do to support learning is to create a culture where learning is seen as valuable and necessary, not an afterthought. You know, for so many organizations, and it's so frustrating, but for so many organizations, training can be a tick box exercise. Part of my soul dies when I think that that's what's happening. And I get it. I know that managers are also overstretched and tired and burnt out and, you know, trying to do their best, but they can make such a difference in how successful that learning can be, you know, how it can be embedded in the work of the staff members who are attending the training, etc. So yeah, some other things that managers can do. So other than creating that culture where learning is seen as valuable, but they can, I think, make efforts to make the staff learning part of everyday work. So whether that is talking about learning in one-to-ones, whether that is knowledge sharing in team meetings, whether that is encouraging reflection or debriefs. That is such an important part of embedding learning and also actually contributing to that culture of learning. What else can managers do? I think they can role model. I always say this in practically every session I deliver. I say that leaders lead by example, right? We lead by example. So I think one of the really useful things that a manager can do is role model continuous learning, and that means investing in your own development. Prioritize your own learning and development. If your teams can see you do that, they are much more likely to do the same. I think managers can also give staff time and space to attend sessions. I've so often seen staff trying to log into an online session from their shift, from their service, and because the expectation is that they've still got to cover the shift while attend the training, and it's clearly never going to work. So I would love for managers to be really clear that their learning and development opportunities, their training opportunities are a priority. They will be given time off shift, away from the service, and that will be prioritized. And not only that, but any follow-up learning or any pre-reading that needs to be done, that also needs to be prioritized. And I just think sometimes staff members need explicit permission to do that. It's not that they don't want to do that, but if they're really busy and they've got 500 other things to do, then it might just make all the difference having a manager say to them, listen, go for an hour now and do the pre-reading for that course that you're going to be doing. Or after they've come back from something, perhaps saying to them, listen, just go take half an hour and complete your action plan. It'll be great for us to discuss this in your one-to-one. But those small things will make all the difference in the staff members' learning, in embedding good practice, so really applying what they've learned, and I think also in terms of contributing to that learning culture. And then the final thing I think managers can do to support learning, so there's quite a few, wasn't there? But the final thing that I think that they can do to support learning is really make sure that any training they are sending their staff teams on, making sure that it's relevant. Again, I do sometimes see staff kind of going to training or being booked on training because, I don't know, there's like a list of things that it's assumed that they need. And I'm not sure that all managers really do a thorough training needs analysis of their staff teams. So I think that works on two levels. I think that is thinking about what individuals require or what individuals need within the team. And then I think it's also about examining what the team as a whole requires for their training needs. Again, I know that managers are so busy, sometimes they don't have capacity to do that, but if they are able to spend a bit of time working out, those training needs on an individual and a team basis, it means that specific training can be identified for specific people or specific teams, which would genuinely help them do their jobs better. So whatever that looks like, it's about then getting the tailored stuff in rather than kind of having some blanket training that everybody has to go to.
That was Roy and Jenny. One more time, thank you so much to them for sending in their thoughts. Cam, is there anything else you want to add that you think would be useful for our listeners to listen about?
Yes, the only thing I wanted to add was that whilst managers have a really big role to play in terms of modeling, role modeling kind of to their staff members and their team, and taking learning in for themselves and making that space and time so that their team know they have that kind of permission, as you say. But I think there's also something in individuals also being able to take that ownership and having the tools to be able to champion to their managers as well as to why that's so important. So it works kind of both ways. It's managers for sure kind of role modeling and allowing the space and permission for staff members and teams to take up that learning, but also individuals to really see that as something that's going to be vital for them, both their well-being and their success, and really being able to champion that in their conversations with managers, senior leadership, because they too genuinely believe that it's going to be beneficial. So I think, I wanted to definitely add that.
Thank you very much. Laura, anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to some of the things we talked about earlier in terms of learning isn't just about training. And we at the Management Centre absolutely support that. And there's lots of different ways in which we like to work with individuals around accessing learning. We've got huge amounts of resources that are available. We're always happy to talk to people around what they've got in mind, what their needs are, and signpost to where they can get different resources and access different types of learning that might support their needs and their way of learning best as well.
And Cam, anything else that you think can help learners? What else can they access?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Fundraising Everywhere, we do have Fundraising Everywhere membership, both for individuals and organizations, which gives you access to unlimited library of webinars, conferences, access to workshops and community with others. We also do matchmaking where we can partner you up with another fundraiser or marketeer in the sector if you've got a question or a challenge, and embed some of that coaching in there as well. So really thinking of you as a whole human, as well as the kind of role and job that you do, and how do we help you to be really confident and successful about that. So if you'd love to get in touch about Fundraising Everywhere membership, whether that be organizational or individual, please do get in touch with me. hello@fundraisingeverywhere.com will get you there. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Cam St-Omer Donaldson, and sometimes post about learning and development, mostly.
I hear you. We mostly post about learning and development too. Occasionally I post about how I'm struggling with time management, but it's all there. It's all there for people to look at. So yes, do reach out to any of us if you want further information. Big thank you to Roy and Jenny, and of course to Cam and Laura for being here today. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more from us, please send in your suggestions. We want to know what you want to know. So email yvette@managementcentre.co.uk. So that's YVETTE@managementcentre, management centre with an RE, not an ER, .co.uk. Thank you so much and take care.